Hi, this video is going to discuss a little bit about bash initialization files. So these are the files, the configuration files, if you will, that are read by any bash process when it is started. So every time you start a shell, a bash shell, bash is going to go through a certain number of initialization files. Some of them are located in your own home directory, in the home directory of the user you are logged in as. Other files, initialization files, are located in system-wide areas. So most of the files we're going to deal with are located, for example, in /etc, the /etc folder that is used actually for configuration files that are going to affect all the users on your system. Okay, so before we dig into those configuration files and figure out which one are executed when, it is important to clarify two things that often cause problem to students. Number one, you can have multiple bash shells running for one user at any time. Okay, it's very important. Sometimes it creates a little bit of confusion. So let's go to our Ubuntu system here. Let's say that I minimize this window here. I'm going to minimize the browser behind as well. There we go. So we have a clean desktop. If I open a terminal window like this one, I have a bash running here, so I can execute commands, right? I have a bash shell in this window. If I open another terminal, guess what? I have another terminal window. Inside this terminal window, I have another bash shell that allows me to execute commands independently. If inside a given terminal window I go to the menu for that window and I say I want a new tab in that window. So you can see now I have two tabs, each of them is running its own bash shell. So that's the first thing that I wanted to clarify, because sometimes it pops up, is you can have multiple bash shells running for one user at any time. And you can have obviously multiple users on your Linux system logged remotely and whatnot. Okay, so each of them would be able to have multiple bash shells as well. The second thing I want to talk about, and this one is actually mentioned in our readings, it's the different types of bash shell that you can start. So the first differentiation is whether your bash shell is interactive versus non-interactive. And this is going to be very easy for us, okay? An interactive bash shell means that you are going to be able to type commands, so interact with it, okay? And on a non-interactive bash shell, this is something that we haven't used so far, but that would mean that you are actually executing commands that you have been specifying in a file. Okay, we refer to that as a script. So interactive mean you type commands. Okay, non-interactive means script. So we're going to talk about that later. Okay, we haven't seen an example of it yet. That's what I mean to say. So that means that for this module, we are going to always be in this category, interactive bash shell interpreter. Okay. Now there is another differentiation here. You can distinguish between login bash shells and non-login bash shells. So what does it mean when you start a bash shell in login mode? That means that you had to provide credentials. You had to authenticate. Okay? Non-login, you didn't. Easy enough, right? So let me illustrate a little bit all of this with the Ubuntu virtual machine there. When I started those windows here, I didn't have to provide any credential, right? So these were definitely non-login bash shells that were started. I am capable to interact with them. Okay, so these are interactive, no doubt there. But these were non-login bash shells. So if I go back to my table here, and I'm going to add some columns here. There we go. How do we start actually a non-login bash shell? Well, one of the way is just type bash in another shell. Okay, that's what we have been doing so far. It worked just fine. Okay. Is there any other way to do this kind of, to start this kind of shell? Well, anything like opening a new terminal would work as well, and then opening a new tab in a terminal window would work as well. So I should say a terminal window here. Okay. All of these we have already demonstrated. They work just fine, and every time I didn't have to provide any credentials. So these were non-logging bash shells. Now, what about logging bash shells? Can we have some examples of that? Well, sure. Let's go back to Ubuntu. I'm going to press Control Alt and one of the F key, F1, F2, F3, F4, or F5 up to F6. Okay. So Control Alt F3, for example. This is what happens. What happens here is that I switch from the desktop view to one of the virtual console, because I type Control Alt F3. This is the third virtual console, and here I can log in using my username. Okay, and this is actually giving me a text console to interact with my virtual machine independently of the desktop environment. And you can see that I had to provide my credentials. Therefore, this is what is started here is a bash shell. You can see that I can use the same command. This is a bash shell that has been started in login mode. All right. If I exit this bash shell, I come back to the login for that console. I can switch back to my desktop by pressing Control Alt F7. And here we go. I am back in my desktop environment. Okay. So this is an example of login bash shell, how to start a bash shell in logging mode. So Control plus Alt plus, we use F3, okay, then Control plus Alt plus F7 to go back to the desktop. So Control Alt F3 was to get to a virtual console. Okay, that's the terminology I want you to remember. Is there another way to get a bash logging shell? Because we are going to have to try different things, okay? As we learn, you know, that there are several configuration files for the bash, we are going to learn that some of them are used when you start in login mode, some of them when you start in non-login mode. So we are going to have to test out our setups by starting login and non-login bash shells. And guess what? Going to the virtual console is not necessarily the most practical thing. So instead, we have an alternative here. We can just we can just type bash, okay? That would start, how to say, an interactive non-logging shell inside of our console on top of the bash shell that's already there. But we can also type bash -- login, and that's not going to prompt us for our credentials, but that's going to tell bash, I want you to start. And I know that because I start you like this on a command line, you would start as a non-logging shell, but I want you to still go through all the steps you would follow if you were started as a logging shell. Okay, so you can see that while the result is the same, I have another shell here on top of my previous shell. When I exit this shell, I go back to the previous one, but you can see that I started this shell actually as a logging shell. Okay, and we're going to talk more about those little messages here that are like popping out there. So, summary: we have interactive shells, we have non-interactive shells, we have logging shells, we have non-logging shells. We have a way already to start a logging shell, we have a way to start a non-logging shell. Okay, so I'm going to add this method here. Just type bash -- login in another shell. Okay, in another bash shell or shell window. And so we are pretty much all set up here to experiment with both logging and non-logging interactive bash shell as we are testing different, you know, configuration files and whatnot. So now what we are going to do, we are going to figure out what are the configuration files that are relevant to us, to bash starting in logging and non-logging mode, where to find information about them, and we are going to play with them to see exactly what happens when we start a bash shell. So let's get started with where are we going to find information about this. Here's the good news. There is one place that's going to provide you all the information you need, the man page for bash. So that's the good news. The bad news is that the man page for bash is quite impressive. Okay, so this is a man page. I'm going to scroll real quick just to give you an idea of the length. Every time I'm going to press space, we're going to scroll down one page. So this is 2 page, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. We're at 30. Okay, we are about 40 now. Okay, you can see that there is a lot of information. I'm scrolling faster. I'm not counting anymore. So that's the bad news. The bad news is that the man page for bash is a complete manual for the bash shell. All right. Fortunately, the section that interests us, I'm going to point you to it. I'm going to go back to the beginning of the man page. Okay, so I'm going to exit here, typing Q, and then man bash again, and I'm going to use the search feature inside of man page. So you know that by typing a slash, you have a prompt here at the bottom of the page that allows you to type something that you want to look for. I'm going to type invocation. What happens when bash is invoked? So I hit enter, and it's looking for every occurrence of that word in the manual. By pressing slash again and enter, I jump to the next location where the keyword invocation was found. And that's the one that interests me. So after 5 or 6 of them, I see invocation as a title of a subsection. And this subsection here will explain to you, so it's relatively small, you can see there's about 1 page, okay? This subsection is going to explain to you everything you need to know about the initialization files that are executed when you start a bash shell. So again, that's a good news. Good news, first good news was everything we need is in the man. Bad news was the man is pretty long. Good news again is if you look at the invocation section, you are going to have everything you need to understand how the bash shell is initialized and how you can configure it. Okay, so we did good news, good news, another bad news. Generally, this is confusing for students. Every semester there are many questions on what's happening there. So I'm going to try to give you some hints here to give you a sort of a summary, a synthesis of what the section is explaining. But I really encourage you to go back and read it because you need to learn to extract information from man pages. This is a primary source reference source when you have a question about a Unix or Linux command. So you need to learn to read man pages. This is something that you need to get used to, okay? Generally, when you start reading man page, they are really difficult to read, and then progressively you get better. But in order to get better, you need to practice, right? So I'm going to help you on this one because this is early in the course, and I'm going to give you an outline of the information therein. But do not be lazy. Do not say, well, I know now how it works, I'm not going to go back to the page. Please go back to the page so that you can, now that you have an idea of what to find, it's going to make the reading of the section of the man page much easier for you, but it's still going to build up those skills, okay? And eventually, keep in mind, your goal is to be able, when you're on the Linux system and you have a question about some tool or some configuration file, to just dig into the man page, get the information you need from there and apply it, okay? That's really a primary goal in this offering. So let's talk about what kind of information we have. Well, there are different scenarios, right? Interactive, non-interactive, login, non-login. So let's talk about the startup of an interacting logging bash shell. What happens? Well, the first thing that is looked at, the first configuration file that is read, is a configuration file that is system-wide. You can tell because it's located in a subfolder named etc. So we start at the root of your file system, which is kind of like the root of the C drive, you know, on a Windows operating system, something like that. So we start at the root of the file system. We go into etc subfolder, which is a subfolder where a lot of our system-wide configuration is going to be held. And then we have a file in there that's called profile. So that's the first thing looked at when you start an interactive login bash shell. Then the second thing that's looked at configuration file-wise is one of the following. Actually, not one of the following, the first of the following which exist. So the first files in the list I'm going to give you that exist. The first one is tilde dot bash underscore profile. So the tilde here is a shortcut notation. It means your home directory. So for example, in this VM, I'm logged in as user tux. Let me confirm that to you. Who am I? Tux. Okay. Where am I on the file system? I am in /home/tux. So on this particular Linux system, the home directories of users are going to be in a folder named /home. So if I take a look, if I peek at /home, I'm going to see that there are two users on the system, Tux and Tux2. Okay, so this is pretty much this is a convention that can be changed. Okay, it's very common to put every user in /home. Sometimes you have some subfolders, for example /home/faculty, and then all the home directory of faculties, or /home/students and all the home directory of student if you're talking about a Linux server shared by faculty and students. So you have different configuration here that a system administrator can set up how he or she wants, okay? But the default in our virtual machine is going to be that the tilde is an abbreviation for /home/your username /, okay? So this is a configuration file that is in my personal user space. The second one, if the first one doesn't exist, that's going to be looked for is bash login, okay? And the third one that's going to be looked for if the other failed is .profile. Okay. So we have pretty much a startup for an interactive login bash. So what about an interactive non-login bash shell? What are we going to look for? Well, the first one we look for, again, /etc, so it's a system-wide file, bash.bashrc. The second one, tilde, so it's a personal file, bashrc. So you will note here that we always read configuration from the system-wide configuration that has been set by the system administrator, and then we look up the personal user configuration. That means that if a variable is defined in this file, it can be overwritten by a user in that file. So if you don't like the execution path that you have, for example, by default, you can override it here. Same thing for the RC. Okay. Now we are going to make a little experiment, if you will, to see exactly when those files are being executed and in what order. Okay. So let's go back to the terminal. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to edit those files. So I'm going to have to edit both files that are in my home directory and files that are in /etc. To be able to edit the files in /etc, I need privilege, okay? Because these are system-wide files, okay? So it's like, this is typically what the system administrator would modify for all the users to benefit from the modification. So I have to use sudo, because I'm going to touch something that is a configuration for my entire system. So I'm going to do sudo gedit. I forgot the important part here. So I'm starting a text editor, and I'm going to do a sudo gedit on /etc profile. That's going to be the first one. And then I'm going to do a gedit on /etc bash dot, and I'm using autocomplete here to list all possibilities. Dash bash.bashrc. That's the one I want. That's it. So I'm going to edit those two files, and I'm going to also edit, which one did I mention here? .profile would work, and .bashrc would work as well as far as my personal files go. So .profile and .bashrc. Okay, so these are files that are right here in my folder. We have here four configuration files that we mentioned in our notes document here, okay? And we want to instrument them. We want to add commands in them so that we are capable to see pretty much what order they are being executed in. So to do this, very easy way is to add an echo command. So I'm not modifying the file, right? You can see here I left everything as it is. I just introduced a few blank lines, and I can do here hello world. Okay, echo hello world between double quote, just to see when this file is being executed. Okay, go back to my shell, and I'm going to need to open several terminals. So I'm going to minimize this one. There we go. And I'm going to open another terminal nearby. There we go. So what I would like to do now is I would like to test if this file is executed. I enter bash Nothing. Nothing is displayed on the screen. That suggests that when I start bash in non-login mode, that file is not actually read. So let's see, non-login, yes, I didn't mention etc profile, so login mode etc profile would be definitely read. Well, let's try this. What about bash dash dash login? So first, to avoid doing again, the same mistake, I exit the bash that I just opened, and I open another one. Hello world, that works. So the good thing is that now I have a marker here that tells me when this file is being used. Okay. The bad thing is that if I put hello world in another file, then I'm not going to know which one is saying what. So I could say hello world in one file, then hello world 2 in the other file. Sure, why not? But this is not exactly easy to remember which one has what message. So instead, I'm going to type a message that says this is /etc profile, okay, being read. So that's going to tell me which file, and I'm talking here about /etc profile, okay, which file is being read right now. So I'm going to take this echo statement, and I'm going to go to, let's say, .profile. So same thing, my point is not to modify .profile, I don't want to break anything here, I'm just going to find like the first spot after the first block of comment, and I'm going to say this is, and this time it's my own personal profile.profile file. So this is tilde/.profile being read. Okay, save. And we are going to experiment again to see when those guys are triggered. So exiting the bash shell, okay, bash, still nothing, bash dash dash login. This is /etc profile being read. This is tilde /dot profile being read. So that confirms actually what we have been talking about so far. Now, for the non-logging bash, we haven't seen anything being read yet. So we are going to instrument as well those two files here and see when they are being read. So we know for sure they are going to be read when we start a non-logging bash, right? But there's maybe more to the story. So let's go back here. Let's go to we're going to start with bash.bashrc, which is in /etc, and I'm going to instrument it. There we go, echo, this is, so I need to change the name obviously, right? This is /etc bash.bashrc being read, and I save. And then the last one, -bashrc, the last one, I need to same thing, find a spot, make some room, paste my echo statement, oops, and then modify the name of the file. So it is my own personal configuration file .bashrc. Okay, this is tilde/.bashrc being read. Save. And let's go back to experimenting. So I'm going to close this window here because I opened two bash in cascade. I want something clean to experiment. So let's close. Let's reopen, new terminal. Okay, well, when I open just a terminal like this, okay, non-logging bash shell, you can see bashrc is being read. You can see my personal bashrc is being read as well. Okay, so that means that those RC files are actually read when I start a non-logging bash file. Confirmation. Now, what about when I start a non-logging, when I start a logging bash file? So bash dash dash login. Well, interesting. So what we had so far, let me go back to our note. For a logging bash, we talked about the main configuration files were /etc profile and one of these. Now you can see that in addition, and I'm going to try to keep both maybe on the same page. Let me move this on this side. Let me move this on this side. So now what we see is that indeed the first thing to be read is /etc profile, okay? But then the second thing is not directly this file here. It's the same file that we have in a non-logging bash shell. So this one here is second. And I'm going to put it in a different color, and I'm going to explain why in a second, okay? So I'm going to, there we go, highlight it. Then the third one that is being read, the third configuration file read at startup is tilde.profile. Yep, that's the one that we had here. So far so good. And then what? And then we have tilde/.bashrc. So this file here I don't know if I can resume the numbering like this. Yep, perfect. This file here is being read, but again, I'm going to put it in a different color. So why do I mark these guys in a different color? Well, these guys are being read in both cases, right? Let's take a look real quick at /etc profile. So I'm going to /etc profile, okay, and I'm not going to explain every single line, okay, that's not the point, but I would like to draw your attention. We're going to do that when we deal more with scripting later, but I would like to draw your attention to this line here, dot space /etc bash dash bash rc. Well, if I go back to my note, that's the next file that's being executed, okay? So without even going into tracing what exactly happens here, what are those if statement doing, etc. What the idea I want to bring here, and this is something that is mentioned actually in the textbook too, is that the profile, the system-wide profile configuration file, is going to invoke the bash.bash rc system-wide configuration file as well. Okay, that's why it's being triggered here. Alright, if we remove this line, if we remove this if statement logic here, it's not going to be read automatically. Automatically, this is read. Then, because this file calls for this over configuration file to be read, then it is. Otherwise, it would not be. Okay. Same thing happened here between .profile and .bash rc. Okay. By default, the interactive logging bash is going to actually read and execute this file, then read and execute this file on our system, and only because this file tells it to, it's going to go back and check this file. So pragmatically, what comes out of all of this is that if you want to set up some configuration that you want to actually affect only non-logging bash files, it's difficult. It's difficult as long as the /etc profile and the .profile, in our case, a configuration file in the user, is calling the RC files. Each of them are calling their respective counterpart, system-wide counterpart in terms of RC file. So that would be difficult to do. But if you want to introduce a configuration that's going to actually only affect logging shells, then it's easy to do it by targeting one of those two files, for example. Okay, so that's one of the pragmatic consequences of this this particular setup. You could go to /etc profile. Okay, so this guy here, and you could remove this. If you remove this, obviously you are not going to call /etc bash.bash rc. So here's a way for you to prevent this file to be executed for logging bash shells, and therefore any configuration you put in this file would be only triggered by non-logging bash shells. That's good. That's good for the /etc profile and /etc bash.bash rc file. However, you don't have control over this. Okay, the .profile. That means that a user could actually, in their .profile, call actually the .bash rc file in their home directory. So that you cannot control, you cannot prevent. As a matter of fact, they could even call the /etc/bash.bash rc in their own individual profile. You cannot control that either. Okay, so that makes it really tricky to actually have configurations that are not going to be applied in the case of a logging bash versus non-logging bash shell. Okay, so think about those different cases. Don't hesitate to ask questions if you have any. And this is something, like I said, there are a lot of good news. The information is all in the main page, etc. But this is something that you are going to understand best if you do the kind of experimentation that I have demonstrated in this virtual machine on your own virtual machine.